Hey, it's Anthony Meisner with Land Title. Came to bring you your big update for the month. Let's talk through Boulder County and what we're seeing. Now, looking back into August, right here, we're sitting in September, we can see that inventory is not too much higher than it was. A year ago, we're up about 4%. Year to date, we've had some decent up in sales by maybe 4%, kind of slow and steady still from what you can see. Under contract numbers, though, last month looked a little bit better than usual, 11% more than we've seen prior. Now, the average sales price is still showing us some negative numbers. So let's dive into it a little bit more. Average sales price is down 3.7%, but let's look at active listings for detached specifically. So this is a market that is definitely operating very differently than the attached market. More so inventories coming online. People are definitely expiring listings coming off the market, but we're still 11% above where we were this time last year. City of Boulder has come down under 100 or under 400 total units, but year over year, that's very similar to where they were. Erie's up by 5%. We're still more than 200 units on the marketplace. Longmont, though, really picking up in inventory levels, over 300 now, and that's 14% more than this time last year. On the flip side, places like Superior, actually less inventory than they had this time last year. Could be also some of those expireds taking place. Now, if we look at the attached side of the inventory level, year over year, we're down 8% in inventory. That's a big shift. Why is there a shift there? Lots is coming off the market. City of Boulder is down 12% year over year. Erie has a 41% drop in active units for the attached market. Other places, Longmont, 10% drop in inventory. And I think a lot of this is not due to sales. A lot of it is due to maybe it's getting pushed into the rental category, or it's just, getting taken off the marketplace. Superior, 18% drop as well in inventory year over year. So the attached market is acclimating to these different prices, and sellers don't seem to like it, so they're pulling them off the market. The month supply of inventory, though, detached is at 4 months of inventory across the entire market. We're seeing some stuff drop below the 3-month threshold. Louisville, Lafayette, really just slightly below 3 months of inventory. Erie, Longmont, and Superior, all kind of right in that same vein, just over 3 months of inventory. It's the higher price stuff where we're seeing it take a little bit longer, and there's more of it to sell, right? So the City of Boulder at 5.2, Niwot at 6. If you look at the attached market, very different scenario, right? A lot has come off the market, but we still have 5 months of inventory. City of Boulder is still sitting around 6, and most of the other submarkets somewhere around that 4.5 to 5 range. Outside of the City of Erie, Erie's got 3 months of inventory. Now, if we look at the days in MLS, so this is an interesting one. Days in MLS for detached single-family homes, 42 days. Niwot sold in 22 last month, right? Longmont's at 36. It's plugging along pretty good. Erie, because of the higher inventory level, is taking a little bit longer to sell, but 56 days for over 200 units in Erie should be expected, right? It's not terrible. Now, the attached market, total flip of the coin. Superior, 109 days leading the charge. But as a county, 20 days higher than the detached counterpart, right? So 62 days in MLS. You're seeing that in the City of Boulder. You're seeing Louisville be very similar. Outside of Longmont and Lafayette, everything has just been rising because it's been sitting on the market so long. If we look at it by price range, let's combine everything again. The one thing you can see here is there's been way more luxury inventory selling at the 2.5 to 3 million mark. Very notably, 72% more sales across the year. And that's a huge number. So lots more sales taking place, but there is a lot of inventory. We still have 200 units on the market over 2.5 million, even though we're selling, 10 to 15 a month. It does take a while to get through those, right? So that's a lot of month supply. Then you get down into the more median ranges. You can see sales are up just a tick. The only one we're really starting to see a little bit of a drop in was that 1.5 to 2 million. We've been talking about some of the struggles there, right? Most people have to borrow for it. The cost of money is still fairly prohibitive. Hopefully, in the fourth quarter here, as we're headed that direction, you're going to start to see some of that break loose with those interest rates starting to shift down just a little bit. So hang in there. Now, if you look at month supply of inventory and days on market by price range, this is where we really have to look at detached and attached separately. The detached market under $1 million, there's not a ton of inventory still, right? It's okay. There's around 3 months, a little bit under 3 months in most of those categories. It's still fairly seller favored. Selling in 30, 40 days, those are good numbers, right? So we're kind of seeing that. If you get into the higher ranges where, 1.5 plus, very clearly buyer favored marketplaces, the best homes are selling and everything else seems to be sitting more. Because the best homes are selling quicker, right? Look at the 2 to 2.5 million mark, 37 days, but there's a ton of inventory, right? 6 months of inventory. That tells us that those newer homes, or those homes that are updated, that look nice, that are priced correctly, are selling while everything else is sitting. Now, if we talk about it by the attached market, this is where the entire tide has risen, right? 4.5 is the minimum at 500,000. So we're talking 6 months of inventory, pretty standard. You get into luxury. Luxury is very similar to everything else. 16, 12, 15 months of inventory. Takes longer to sell those products, but yet again, those nicer luxury products are still the ones selling faster. So you can use this to help have those conversations with your clients. The one I wanted to talk most about, average sales price. How do you have a conversation around what's happening to price in the marketplace? Detached single-family homes have shrunken in value, right? It depends submarket to submarket. So use the data at the bottom or reach out to me for other market information to help have this conversation. But over the last 12 months, the city of Boulder has stayed fairly stable. 0.33% drop in price, right? Year over year, we show this huge drop in price, but it doesn't amortize the sales well. So you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. If you look at the county as a whole, year over year is 4.5% down. But realistically, in the last 12 months, we've only experienced a slight drop. Now, how do we measure that, right? Louisville having an increase in sales price, a lot of that's due to building more expensive homes in those Marshall Fire rebuilds. You see that in Superior in some cases too, where they're still seeing that rise. But as a whole, everything is sort of ticking down just a little bit. And we've seen 3 years of downward pricing pressure, right? You have less buyers than sellers for 3 straight years. This is bound to happen. So if interest rates are starting to lower, it's going to take some of that pressure off the marketplace. But we still have a few more months of this year where you're going to see that downward pressure in the pricing situation. The attached market, way worse off in so many ways. The city of Boulder is showing over the last 12 months, it's very stable, but that's not taking into account the price. The luxury stuff is doing well, and then our median condo is not doing well. So it falls in line with a lot of what you're seeing out in the marketplace. The townhouses that are newer are more desirable and they're easier to sell. So this has way more complications in it. I think this is one we really need to dive into more specifically. But understand Boulder County housing as a whole over the last 12 months is really stable. I think that's really key. But there are pockets in the market, luxury, attached units that are cheaper, that are older, right? Those are really struggling in price where maybe the median homes are actually appreciating in some way. Okay, so if you look at the sold units, you can see really how we've done. We kind of had a rougher start to the year. February was a hard market. June, we way outperformed. We've seen fairly stable amount of sales taking place in July and August. September could easily be the same way as we see interest rates trickle down. People are still participating in the market. What you're feeling out there in the market, though, is just that elevated level of inventory has created some of that where it's uncertain, right? But the solds are showing the different story. It's showing buyers are doing what buyers want to do, and they're directing the entire market at this point. It is not a seller-driven market. It is a buyer-driven market, which is how over the last 3 years we've seen this different seasonality in the marketplace. Percentage sold price to list price is sitting at 97.7% across the county. This is lower than expected, but it really is trickling down year over year over year. And so we really see this settle. It doesn't tell the whole story, though, because price drops aren't taken into account and concessions are still sitting around 60% for homes under $1 million. So lots of wiggle room underneath this bar. This metric is not nearly as useful as it used to be, but it does tell us a story of it's just getting harder and harder to sell real estate, and buyers are more and more in favor. So I think that if nothing else, we can take that one away. If you have other questions, concerns, you need other data or information, please reach out to me. I'm Anthony Land Title, and we'll see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel.